I'm Laurie Cardoza-Moore, and this is Focus on Israel. On March 11, 2011, 5 members of a Jewish family were murdered in their beds in the settlement of Itamar, Israel. We'll take you there on our program today and hear an eyewitness account from the former mayor of Itamar. Today's program is not recommended for young children, so please be aware of the graphic nature of this story and some of the images. Hello, I'm Laurie Cardoza-Moore, and I want to thank you for joining me today on Focus on Israel. In 2005, I founded Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating and sharing the message of Christian biblical responsibility to the people and land of Israel against the rise of a global genocidal anti-Semitism. Like most Americans, I began to ask a lot of questions about what happened to our country following 9/11. As I read and talked to experts, the issues of radical Islam and the attacks on America and Israel became extremely important to me. I realized that Israel is facing threats from nearly every corner, from Iran's nuclear weapons program, from terrorist groups such as Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, and now ISIS. I also saw how much of the world opposes the Jewish state, from the UN to the European countries and to every one of Israel's neighbors. The UN and the world continue to demand the creation of a Palestinian state, a terrorist state on Israel's biblical heartland. Now we see a rise of global genocidal anti-Semitism, and with the Obama regime, a U.S. administration that is outright hostile and condemning of Israel. With threats from every corner, it seems we're heading closer to the biblical prophecy of Armageddon in the Middle East. So if you're a Christian, why should you care? Many Christians believe that as the Jews rejected Jesus, God rejected them. This replacement theology is growing as many Christians believe they have replaced the Jews in God's prophetic plan. If you truly believe the Bible is the Word of God, then you know that when he speaks of Israel, he is speaking about the land of Israel and the Jewish people. The mission of this series and PJTN is to educate and equip you so that you can share this truth with your family and friends. The Jewish settlement of Itamar is located squarely in the heart of the ancient biblical homeland of Israel in Samaria. Itamar is literally where the Bible lives in the land of Israel. Abraham entered the land of Israel in the town below. The tomb of Joseph is here, and it is completely surrounded by biblical sites. Itamar is an integral part of the history of the Jewish nation and heritage. This piece of land is now incorrectly called the West Bank and labeled as an occupied territory. This occupation lie has been spread since Israel won it back and liberated this land from the Jordanians in the Six-Day War of 1967. Attacks by Muslims on multiple Jewish settlements is ongoing, and in Itamar alone, 22 people have been murdered in the last decade. But this terrorist attack and brutal murder of 5 members of the Fogel family, mother, father, 2 children, and even 3-month-old Hadass, has only strengthened the Samarian community's resolve to stand up to such violence. Israeli soldiers mounted a massive search in Samaria after the attack. It was believed that 2 of the dead had their throats cut. The alarm was raised by the couple's 12-year-old daughter, who returned home from a youth event in the settlement to find the blood-stained scene. 2 other children asleep in a separate room at the time of the attack were unharmed. Rabbi Yaakov Cohen, a neighbor who entered the house with the 12-year-old girl, said that her 2-year-old brother was lying next to his bleeding parents, shaking them with his hands and trying to get them to wake up while crying. The sight in the house was shocking. According to an Israeli settlement security official who visited the scene of the attack, 1 or 2 intruders scaled the security fence surrounding Itamar and entered the family's home through a window. The murders were met with shock and disgust across the Israeli political spectrum. But in Gaza and other Palestinian cities, many celebrated the attack, distributing sweets and candy. In Jerusalem, Israel's prime minister unequivocally demanded international condemnation of the terrorists.
I expect the international community to unequivocally condemn this act of savage murder. The terrorist murdered a young family, a mother, a father, a boy of 11, a boy of 4, a baby girl of 4 months. They all had their throats slit. They were sleeping in their beds and they were savagely murdered by animals. The international community that so quickly rushes to condemn Israel over a building here or a building there, for some reason takes its time in condemning this savagery, this brutality, this murder that has no justification. Something else has to be pointed out. The Palestinian Authority engages in double talk. To the world outside, they speak peace. To their own people inside, they teach incitement. They allow incitement of hatred and violence against Israel in their schools, in their mosques, in their state-controlled media. This has got to end. The international community must demand from the Palestinian Authority an end to incitement. The Palestinian Authority must stop incitement and begin to educate its people towards peace. That's the only way that we'll have peace.
Following the lifting of a gag order, it was revealed Sunday that Israel's security forces have arrested 2 Palestinian teenagers for the murder of 5 members of the Fogel family on the night of March 11th. Amjad Awad and Hakim Awad both admitted to committing the murders and claimed to be members of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. The suspects admitted that they entered the settlement of Itamar and murdered Ehud and Ruth Fogel, along with 2 of their young children, Yoav 11 and Elad 4, before later returning to kill 3-month-old Hadass and finally fleeing the scene. 6 additional Palestinian suspects were also arrested in connection to the crime. The 6 allegedly aided the 2 alleged perpetrators in hiding the murder weapons and in suppressing additional evidence.
I had a rare chance to sit and speak with Itamar residents and founders Moshe and Leah Goldsmith about the attack. Moshe is a Brooklyn native who made Aliyah 26 years ago and was mayor of Itamar at the time. He stated then that no one will break our spirit. We are a very strong people, and we believe in our connection to the land of Israel. We believe in the Jewish right to have a homeland, and that Itamar is part of the backbone.
Well, again, the Fogel story was something that, this tragedy, this massacre, is something that will, of course, be with me my entire life. Unfortunately, living on Itamar, the difficulties have been 22 of our community members that were murdered in the last 12 years. That's been very, very painful, obviously. Particularly the Fogel family, which was only last year, again, I was on the scene of most of these terrible tragedies, and as a member of the response team of Itamar response team, we begin the story by saying that I was home. It was a Friday night, and as a matter of fact, we had a beautiful Shabbat meal that we always do as a Sabbath in our home, and I'll never forget, it was the portion of Leviticus where we discussed sacrifice, and I didn't realize that someone would be sacrificing his life again. That just a few hours later, I went to sleep and my emergency phone went off. We don't answer the phone on the Sabbath as religious Orthodox Jews unless it's emergency. And my emergency phone goes off and Leah wakes me up. It must have been about 12 o'clock, I recall, 12 o'clock or 12:30 at night. And I get the phone. She says, Moshe, your phone's going off. I quickly listen and I hear right away that there were shots being fired in the community. I said, what's going on? Quick, I said, Leah, I'm going to run out and see what's happening. So I quickly took my rifle, my gear as a response team member, ran out of the house. I told her to lock the door, and I started making my way in the direction of where I was told to gather with our soldiers. We get to a certain point, and I'm already hearing that someone was killed. These small details are coming in through my radio, but then again, we make it to the Fogel house, and as I get to the Fogel house, someone's coming out of the house right away, a friend of mine, and I see it on his face, and he just said, you know, everything, without saying anything to me, he said it all. And I myself did not want to look at the bloodshed, the terrible bloodshed of a mother and a father and 3 children murdered, massacred inside their home, where these terrorists entered the community at around 9, well, we have a record that about 9 o'clock at night, they crossed over the fence, they waited in the forest below, they entered first a neighboring home. In that neighboring home, they actually had time to make themselves coffee and sit and relax while they were observing the Fogel home at that time. A miracle for the neighbors happened, that they went away the last minute. They decided to go to Jerusalem because one of the children weren't feeling well. So they went to Jerusalem and saved a big family, a life of also a very big family. And they waited. As I said, they were waiting, staking out the Fogel home because there was a oneg going on. Oneg means we're having on Friday night, a lot of times we have a custom of having a beautiful party where people sing and talk about the Sabbath and talk of Torah. So here the Tamara Fogel, one of the surviving children, the daughter, she had a whole class there. She was at that time in 7th grade, so she had a 7th grade class in the house with the parents. They're having this beautiful Shabbat experience inside the home. And they waited until they didn't want to make too much of a ruckus, the terrorists. They waited till they left because they heard a lot of people in the house. And Tamar was saved when she actually escorted her friends to the other direction. And she left the house, and she ended up getting delayed over there. So they entered the home, looking through the window, and catching eyesight of one of the little boys that was in the living room playing. Went inside the house, locked the door from the inside, and began to slaughter, literally slaughter the children from one room to the next. They went to the parents' bedroom, they killed the father, and they killed the mother, and they left the house, and all of a sudden they heard a baby crying. So wait, we forgot someone. They went into the house, stabbed this little baby in the heart, a little 3-month-old baby, and they left through the window, climbing over 2 boys that were sleeping on a couch, which saved their lives.
Under the blanket.
Under the blankets, and they left the house. At that moment, they left, no one knew what was going on. Tamar Fogel comes back, and don't forget the door was locked at that time from the inside, because they left through the window. She comes back at around, whatever it was, when I got my phone call a little beforehand. She comes back to the house, and she hears her brother crying, because one of the boys woke up and trying to wake the father up. She hears him crying. She's getting nervous. She sees mud all over the porch, and she runs back, calls a neighbor who comes back. They wake the other boy on the couch up. He opens the door, and then he said, I'm sure your parents went to sleep. I'm sure everything's okay. And she walks right into her parents' bedroom and finds them murdered. This is the nightmare. And then when I came, right after that, that's when I got to the scene. When I can't even try to explain to you how painful that was. But we couldn't even stop and try to even digest the story, because we had to run house to house to make sure that these terrorists didn't go to other homes and do the same thing. So we went from house to house and knocking on every door. And those who we couldn't call, trying to call up, making sure everyone in the community was safeguarded. So that was like a nightmare. And then in that week, we were constantly on call with people coming and trying to calm the family down. The parents were coming in to see their children, to see what was left of their children, the family. This was a nightmare that we went through. But the Fogels, as a family, was a very special family, because they were thrown out of Gush Katif. They were thrown out of Gaza. That's where they lived. And they continued to want to be pioneers in the land, so they came to Itamar. And Rabbi Udi Fogel was the father. He was a great, great man, a young guy, a very talented rabbi who was teaching in the school. And the mother was also an educator, Ruthie Fogel, a very great, and a family of great people that are doing so much for the land, a very special family. And I'll never forget the last time I saw Rabbi Udi Fogel alive was the night before. I was in synagogue and I have an evening study every evening. And right when we completing our studies, he walks in for the prayers. And I just caught a glance, and I'm looking at him, and I looked 3 times in his direction, because I saw a white light radiating. Just his whole face looked so unusual. I kept looking at it. And I actually asked my friend, do you see that? And he goes, what, are you crazy? He thought I was nuts. I said, I was like looking at him. I said, what am I seeing? But I didn't realize what I was looking at until, of course, 24 hours later, he wasn't alive anymore. And I realized that he already was connected to the upper worlds, spiritual worlds. And I have no doubt that there was something I saw, which I can't explain, but I'll never forget. But this wonderful family is an example of complete devotion to the land of Israel. People that have come and just want to do one thing, of serving God in the land and living in His land. And they gave their life. They gave their life for such a, for what they believe in. And of course, their testimony, their living testimony, goes on with what we continue to do. And their willing testimony is to build the land and to not to give in to terrorism, because the worst thing for us is to pack our bags and leave when struggle comes about. And we continue to fight for the land, and we will never give up until we eventually achieve our goals of seeing the world redeemed by a beautiful world. We believe in the world. We believe in goodness, and that's what the Jewish people stand for, bringing goodness and kindness to the world.
I think when you're busy doing things, doing good, that's the best solvent for the problem. It's very not rational, not logical to know that every time something like this happens, because it's unfortunately happened over the years, a few times these kind of incidents have happened, people from the outside in Israel have come and said, we want to live here. We want to give you strength. So if it had to only do with the internal strength of the people that live in the community, I don't think it would work. It's when you feel that brotherly love coming from the outside, or not just from inside Israel, and not just from the Jewish community, from the Christian community as well. I mean, we have people coming and showing their love and support, just taking a tour in the community, see a bus load of people coming up to Itamar. That is what's keeping us going. So Hashem sends friends from the strangest places sometimes.
and it's encouraging.
Well, that was one of the most difficult periods of my, unfortunately, I've been through not only this tragedy of the Fogels, but also through a kidnapping and murdering of one of our young 18-year-old boys at the same time. The last 4 years, that happened 5 years ago, a little longer, but it's very, very difficult. Number one, because people are afraid. They have to worry about security issues within the community. They feel secure. Why is this happening to us? We have to deal with all the technical details. And that's a lot of, number one, dealing with the army. We had generals come to visit. Conversation with the community was very heated. Discussions with the community. They spoke to the entire community. And you're trying to be a mediator and trying to, again, calm everyone down and realize we have to go on and give strength. And we have people coming over now because just before I left now, we're making a change in the community, and there's going to be new elections now, and I want to go on to be, as I give up my mayorhood for something I believe at this point is more important, to try to work on the outside world and being a bridge and getting people to know what's going on in Israel, on Itamar. So one of the young guys that want to go into the council spoke to me. He goes, "You don't know how much it was for me knowing that you guys with more experience were sitting there as mayor and together at the council and leading us in that time of struggle." So he just mentioned that to me right before I left, how important it was for them, because we look at us as being strong pillars of iron and marble, but we have to, of course, inside it's not easy because we experience very, very difficult things, but you have to be strong and always project faith, as we say in Hebrew, emunah, that we have to go on. The message comes across. It comes sometimes without saying anything. The message comes across because here I never said anything to this guy about this, but he really came over to me and really was so happy, and he told me that just a week ago when I was in Israel before I came here. So
I think that it's really been increasing, the support for living in the heartland. I think just life experience in general has taught the Israeli people a lesson on their own skins. We gave away Gaza. What did we get? Fajr missiles straight into Tel Aviv. That's coming from a small area in the southwest. But if you're talking again about the center of Israel, up on the high ground, strategically, it would be suicide to give it away.
To understand why Israelis themselves or certain political leaders would be pro giving away Jewish land, Jewish assets, which is of course, our heartland, the most important part of Israel. It's a very difficult question. It comes from a secular view of the world and of the events. When people are afraid, when they're afraid of what the world may do, and they're afraid of the world coming against Israel, they give into pressure. This is what, over the years, we've seen, over the last 20 years, unfortunately, of concessions that were made, very painful concessions, they call it, for peace, right? Instead of bringing us peace, they brought us missiles from Gaza into Sderot and now into Tel Aviv and other parts of Israel. So this kind of political management, whatever you want to call it, or listening to what your neighbors outside of Israel are telling you and the world is telling you, is really a polite way or a very smart way of destroying Israel. Because that's really what this is leading us. Leading the people of Israel to destruction is giving in to our enemies and allowing them to take over the land of Israel. And this is what the world, in a very, very friendly smile way, is saying to Israel. Israel, I think, is finally waking up. To get the Jewish people to wake up, sometimes they can sleep for a long, long sleep. It says in the Bible, it talks about Am kilavi yakum. The nation will get up like a lion. So some people that are asleep, like the Jewish people are asleep all the time, look like they're a little lion laying down and sleep. All of a sudden, finally, they finally get up and react finally. The message finally hits their hearts, and that's what's happening. Israel is getting up like a lion now and realizing that if we don't stand up like a lion and defend its cubs, no one's going to do it for us. And that's what's happening today in Israel, I think.
I'd like to thank Moshe and Leah Goldsmith for taking the time to speak with us about this tragedy in their community. We must continue to pray for those who live in the biblical heartland despite the dangers and the risk. That's our show for today. And I want you to know we appreciate hearing from you. Please send your comments and questions to comments@pjtn.org. The time to take a stand is now. Be a leader in your community and in your church. One person can make a difference. Get involved with and support pro-Israel organizations such as PJTN. Call your senators, congressmen, the White House. Let your elected leaders hear from you. Visit our website to learn more. Sign up to receive action alerts and order our films to share with family and friends. Please encourage everyone you know to tune in and become informed. God bless you, and thank you for all you do on behalf of our Jewish brethren and all Israel. We'll see you next time on Focus on Israel.
To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, P.O. Box 682711, Franklin, Tennessee 37068. You can also support PJTN online. Visit pjtn.org or call 1-877-873-9020.
Anti-Semitism has reached epic proportions, and Israel is now surrounded by nations who seek its destruction. For Israel to lose just one battle would mean losing everything. As Christians, it is our biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and Israel. PJTN needs your help to reach more Christians with this urgent message. Please visit our website to become a member today and order our award-winning documentaries. You must decide that you won't be silent. Sign up now at pjtn.org. God bless you, and thank you for your support and prayers.
Focus on Israel is now available on DVD. Each program DVD contains a wealth of bonus materials, including the premier program that started it all, Focus on Israel, program number 1. Also, bonus interview cuts with experts in their respective fields, informational videos from PJTN documentaries, including Israel Indivisible, the Case for the Ancient Homeland, Lest We Forget 9/11 and the Rise of Islam, The Forgotten People, Christianity and the Holocaust, Disinformation, the Secret Strategy to Destroy the West, plus the award-winning music video, The Forgotten People. Focus on Israel program DVDs, great educational tools to combat anti-Semitism. Arm yourself and order today. Please go online to pjtn.org. To order, just click on the Store tab. Thanks and blessings from Focus on Israel.